Welcome, everybody. It's the Fourfold View podcast. We're a podcast dedicated to doing commentaries on books. You have myself, Curtis, Antoine, Greg, and Bay.
Welcome to the Fourfold View podcast. And today we are covering Proposition 5. When God establishes functional order, it is good. And I believe we want to start off with a question from Mr. Bay on this.
Yeah, so my perception of it is that good doesn't have to be perfect. That's what I got from the chapter. I'm not sure if that's 100% accurate, but it's the one thing that I really grasped from it. But if you guys want to school me on it a little bit, I didn't take a lot of notes in this one, so I'm definitely open to learning more about what this chapter meant. I don't know if it's just an off day for me, but I just couldn't really grasp this chapter. But the one overview I got was that good doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be like logical or in line.
My take on it is not necessarily that it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's more of a functional order. So for example, he uses an example of a pilot checking the plane to make sure that things were good. So he goes through the checklist. Oh, this is good. That's good. And it's just more so like acknowledging that things are in order as part of a functional order. So I think the perceived perception of it good not being perfect, I don't think he's using it in that context.
Yeah, so the way that I see it, I do agree with what you're saying, Bay, that good doesn't equal perfect. And I think just in that sentence alone, I think those are two separate, concepts that God is trying to get across. Yes, everything he makes is perfect, but at the same time, I think when speaking about this chapter in particular, when he uses the word good, I think it's just him giving us his creation, the tools to complete whatever work he has in store for us. So I don't think that, I think they're just not, I don't even think those go into the same category, if that makes sense. Like, yes, everything is perfect that God makes. God doesn't make mistakes. We all know that stuff. But with God being, establishing the order and the functionality of the 7-day account, it's just prepping the palette for the creation to do their job or to play their role. At least that's the way that I took it, and it's just this motif that continuously comes up in the book. John Walton, lays out the idea that God intends to build a worldview and holds it in superior fashion to other things, especially this materialistic creation. So that's kind of like how I took it. I took it just as a fact that like he created things that were good and that had functional order, and was like, hey, here's your palette of paint, paint your masterpiece.
Yeah, I feel like you said, that everything God created is perfectly done, but doesn't mean the things created are perfect in themselves. Like basically everything is created perfectly the way God intended, but it doesn't mean that I'm perfect or you're perfect or that tree's perfect. We're only perfect because God made us. And to kind of go on with what Antoine was saying, and I guess you also with you, Curtis, right above the pilot example, he says, I would conclude that good refers to a condition in which something is functioning optimally as it was designed to do in an ordered system. It is working in the way God intended, which makes it good, and what I got from it.
So to add on, okay, I'm grasping it. So it's kind of like maybe like a puzzle where each piece has its intention and it's a jumbled mess until we put it together the way God intended, and then at the end it's like a perfect result.
I don't think you're missing the ball. I think it comes down to this idea of that is presented a few times off the top of my head, particularly in Romans. So there's two verses that come to mind. Romans 3, chapter 3, verse 10 through 12. It says, as it is written, no one is righteous, not one. No one understands, no one seeks for God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless, and no one does good, not even one. So I think the author in Romans and God is laying out that things that are good in your life are good in your life because of God and only God alone. That each individual cannot decide that the levels of goodness, whether that be moral, whether that be even materialistic. Like, it's not up to us to decide what is good. That is up to God. In the second verse that I put down is Romans 8:28. And it's and we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. And again, we talked about often functionality and the path that God has laid out for us to orient ourselves in the world. And I think that's what these verses are also alluding to, that God does everything for our benefit. So if that is the case, and that is what we are called to believe, and that is what our faith is called to accept, well, then it's not for us to understand what has been placed in our life, but just to know that it is for the goodness of our life. And that can be extremely difficult and extremely deep, because there's tragedy. You know what I mean? There are moments in our life that will cause us to wonder, like, how could this possibly be good? And just examples in my life, like I remember maybe 2 years before I bought my house, like I had a car, and it was extremely nice and it was extremely expensive, and it was parked on the side of the road. It was off-street parking. A guy that was intoxicated came and like totaled my car, and I was devastated. And I was just like, what? Like, I was like, God, like in my head, like it's as shallow as it is at the time, like thinking back and now, but I was like, God, why would you allow this to happen? Like, I love that car. It was like my most favorite car. It's the car that I still think about. Like, I want another one. But I was like, why would this happen? But then getting out from under that payment 2 years later allowed me to save up the money and have the money to purchase my house that my kids are going to grow up into. So looking back at now, I was like, yeah, I'm glad God did that to me. But in the time, I was like, I could not fathom how this correlated goodness in my life. And I think that's the purpose of it, is like, we are supposed to completely turn our lives over to God, and to whatever it is that he puts in our life, like, we are to accept it as good.
Yeah, I agree. I think those Romans verses are good examples. But the one caveat I have, or whatever, is that it also pertains to when sin has entered the world. So there's also a way I always interpret it was also that none of us are perfect, because we all have sin, and the only perfect being is God and Jesus Christ, who is God in flesh. So it kind of leads me to the question of what this chapter to me was kind of talking about was, to you guys, what do you think he means by good before sin entered into creation? Like, I'm trying to wrap my head around that. Like, he's talking about, like, before Adam and Eve fell to sin, he's talking about the world was, I guess, talking about the state of the world being good before, I guess, the creation story. Does that make sense?
I think I get what you're saying. For me, that's a deep question. I think it's a loaded question, but the way that I am taking what he's saying is that God created everything knowing that it was good, meaning it's going to work. But it doesn't mean that, oh gosh. So I know what I want to say, but I don't even know if I can articulate it. So God made everything and it was good because it's functional. But kind of to go back to what Brian said, but it's not perfect because we're all flawed individuals, so to speak. So I guess to answer your question, I don't know if I can answer your question. Maybe we need to open this up a little bit more. I don't know. That's a good one.
I'm glad you can't, only for the fact that that's what I was trying to figure out reading the chapter. So I was curious what you guys thought. And as you're talking, Antoine, made me think more so about Brian's analogy of the puzzle. And I feel like, and you hit it too, Antoine, just saying it, that God created everything and it's perfect because he knows it's going to work the way it should. But I guess the ultimate perfection is everything working in the ordered system as a complete puzzle, as Brian was saying. So like the piece is perfect, but not. I don't know how to articulate that, but to me in my head, it's like the piece is created perfectly, but the piece itself by itself is not perfect. But when you put it in part of the ordered system, aka the full puzzle together, therefore that's why it's good or makes it perfect. It's all about the ordering. That's my opinion.
Right. And then, I mean, he even goes in to kind of make it a little bit more confusing. He goes on to talk about things that are like non-ordered in the realm of the world too. So you find yourself trying to grasp everything that he's pertaining to with good and how that goes into the functioning order. But then now you got this whole concept of, what was it? The water above and below were part of the non-ordered realm. Therefore, it would not be good. But they were also functioning as they were designed to do. So, I mean, it's that's loaded.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So this is my take on it, and I'm like, this is the hardest part about having this discussion with four people, because my head is just going all over the place right now. So I'm gonna try to remember everything that I was thinking about when y'all was talking. So first, Greg, I think you answered the question by talking this thing out. And Bay too. So you say you have this these puzzle pieces, and God puts these together, and they're perfect. But what we don't take into account for is the sin. So the sin makes the pieces not fit correctly. So I think the object of perfectness or goodness prior to the fall is just that God created all these things and they fit it perfectly for our betterment. And it was good, but he then also introduced free will. And I think free will is the thing that kind of throws everything out of whack, because he created this perfect order and this perfect functionality for everything to prosper. But then he said, now choose me. Now choose this life. Choose me. Don't be fooled by what is getting ready to happen to you with this desire this desire of disobedience. But that happens. And then once that happens, I think you also see in the 6-day account the idea of God presenting that same disobedience into the fabric of the 6 days, because oftentimes in the Bible and these ancient civilizations and creation myths and like all over the world, the history of the world, all these different civilizations, the serpent, the dragon, those are depictions of chaos, and the water being, a little water can keep you alive through, an oasis, but a lot of water can drown you. You know what I mean? So it's this duality of a little is fantastic and a lot, is too much. And, that brings back to the conversation that we had previously about chaos and order, and order being too much order. There's no utility. There's no autonomy amongst the creation. And that's my take on it, is just that God created something so good and so perfect, but he wanted his creation to choose that path, that narrow path, that, and they didn't. So
is it safe to, I don't know, I think I'm probably going too far with this puzzle analogy now, but you made me think. So this chapter is about when the puzzle pieces were created. They were created perfectly. And then when sin was introduced into the world, it deformed the puzzle piece or messed up the puzzle piece somehow. And by a way of purification, you can get the puzzle piece back to the perfect state and part of the ordered system and create the full puzzle the way God intended. But we have to choose to purify, for not a good word, because I don't know how you purify a puzzle piece, but get it back to the state that was in by turning to God. And then you put it in piece, you put it together in the overall puzzle. And again, the ordered system, where we have our place, and that's where God wants us to choose him, or wants us to choose him and not the way of the world, so that we get back to that close to perfect state that the piece was created in. And ultimately the ordering of everything is still everything's perfect, because that's how God intended to be created. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I agree with everything you're saying. And then, like, to narrow it down to this, I mean, this is only a 5-page chapter. There's a lot to unpack to me. And it sounds like with the group, just trying to discuss through this, is that pre-creation story, everything was already created. It was good. It was perfect. And then, or I guess, was it? Oh, now this is where I got confused. I think
it was
they're
functional.
created. What?
Wasn't perfect, but it was functional, basically.
Right, and then the ordering of the functions is what made it perfect. Creation story. Oh, this is a deep chapter for 5 pages.
I think where we may be getting a little bit more confused is because the chapter doesn't per se, it does talk about the fall, but I think when they're referring to good, it's talking about the creation story. You know, so I think about, if we use the puzzle analogy, God created this puzzle and it all fit together and it was good because it functioned the way that it should have. But I think where we get wrapped up is, like, if I look at a completed puzzle, then that would be perfection. But for whatever reason, in this case, good does not equal perfection. So I don't know. Am I making any sense? This is
you are, but I'm getting into my own way, because I mean, same thing when I was reading it, just trying, like, you make sense, and then I'm like, but what about blah blah blah? Because, like, this is about creation, and I think it's safe to deduce, obviously, that based on the creation story, it's pre-fall, because the fall happens after Adam and Eve were created and tempted in Eden, which is until, I think, Genesis 2 or 3. But you made me think of something that I did highlight, and it may not have anything to do with what you just said, but I just want to say it because I highlighted in the last paragraph of the chapter that it says, likewise, we cannot deduce that Adam and Eve were specimens of humanity who were perfect in every way. So basically saying that we can't assume, or I guess deduce is a better word because it's, like, more technical, that Adam and Eve were perfect humans. It's on page 57, the first sentence of the last paragraph.
I mean, they weren't. And all right, so I don't know. Okay, this is gonna sound wild, but just follow me, okay? I don't think Adam and Eve, and I could be way off on this, and I probably am, because normally I am, but I just think outside the box. I don't think Adam and Eve became perfect humans until the fall. And I say that because Adam and Eve don't receive consciousness until the fall. So what makes us human? Our free will because I think that's what God intends for us to use to determine our love for him. So if his perfect creation is Christ, because Christ always chose the Father, well, then wouldn't they have the opportunity to become perfect once they became conscious of good and evil, of what hurt each other, of emotion, not necessarily emotion, but just of consciousness itself, self-awareness. And to go back like to go back to what you were struggling with, Greg, you're describing the Bible. What is the Bible? The Bible is the creation of the Garden of Eden, like this protected, walled garden, perfect creation. God, you know, I mean, like that's, you know, humanity. The fall, and then from the fall until Revelation is what? The story of redemption, the story of getting back to perfectness. Our, you know, what's about verse? He who creates perfect. Come on, help me out, Twan. He who creates a good work will see it through till perfection. I think that's right.
I just want to squeeze in real quick, and this might derail the conversation a little bit, but I'm going to be my simpleton self. What does it mean by the fall? Because that derailed me in the whole chapter. I have no idea what that is.
I mean, I can go. So basically, the fall of man. So God created Adam and Eve. The fall takes place when they decided to disobey God, and so God tells Adam and Eve, if you eat of the tree, you can eat of any tree, but if you eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that it will kill you. It will create death. And it doesn't mean necessarily, it does mean physical death, because Adam and Eve were probably, you know, to my knowledge, or to what you can infer in the Bible, they were never going to die. Once they got the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they severed their tie with God. That created spiritual death. And then they had to work, they got punished, and then we die as humans. So there's the physical death. Doesn't mean automatically, doesn't mean right away, but it means a spiritual disconnection and a physical disconnection resulting in death, both spiritually and physically. So that would be characterized as a fall. I did a good job, guys. Anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, you hit it around the head.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. It makes more sense now. That lost me for a second. That's what I think what derailed the proposition for me.
And the Bible verse that I was saying goes Philippians 1:6, being confident of this, that he who begins a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. So us being that good work, that we should be confident that he who has come into our life, delivered the Holy Spirit to us, began a good work, that good work being redeemed back to the Father, will be seen through his son, Christ Jesus, right? So that, to me, everything you described, the puzzle, being perfect at once, being shooken up, the sin entering in our life, causing separation, from that moment on, God sending his son was the plan. And that plan is fulfilled from the fall to Revelation, when he comes back in his mighty glory, right? So to me, that's how I see the discussion that John Walton's trying to have with good and evil. I mean, the fall being good or not, and the representation of what does it mean after the fall to be good. And I think it's the plan of Christ.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's the fall, and now you're saying that we're we're working back to get back to that perfect state. But part of me feels like John Walton isn't ever considering good as perfect. And like, he opens up the chapter, let me find it here. I just had it. But he talks about how there are interpreters who have often concluded that in order for the world to be good, there must have not been no pain, no suffering, no death. Everything was pristine and perfect. And it's like, okay, that I would kind of think that as well too. Because like you said, before eating from the tree of knowledge, there was no conscience to evil. So it had to be perfect. But on the flip side, it's like, okay, God said it was good. He created Adam and Eve. It was good, but yet it wasn't perfect. It was just good because it was a functioning order. But I guess the fact that free will is there is, I don't know. Do I make any sense here? Like, I'm trying to wrap my head around, because if you read early on, he says interpreters have concluded that the world, in order for the world to be good, there's no pain, no suffering, but he doesn't say that he necessarily agrees with that.
Yeah, I picked up on that too. I don't, to be honest, I don't know what to do with that. There's a couple like lines in this that to be honest, I don't know what to do with. Like I think I have reached my ceiling when it comes to knowledge on this particular subject. That until I can maybe gain some more, I don't really know what to do with the idea of what is perfect pre-fall. Like I don't. To me, the best that I can, I told y'all the best that I got, that maybe we weren't necessarily perfect until we got free will to choose God. You know what I mean? Because he created humanity for relationship. Well, if he created humanity for relationship, but then programmed them to just be robots and do everything that he said, then is that a perfect creation? I don't like, and I'm not saying that. I don't know. Like I don't know. That's why I said I could be way off. Like people could go nuts in the comment section when I say that, humanity wasn't perfect until the fall. Like I'm sure people are gonna go nuts. Like I'm saying it from a place of just I don't know. Like I don't know everything. So I'm just giving it the best shot I can. And if somebody, I'm sure I could be easily convinced otherwise with enough information. That's just the best that I got currently.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I have the same sentence that Antoine read, highlighted, and I was hoping that I was kind of see what we discussed with that, what we get from that. And I think I hit my ceiling as well. I never really thought about the world pre the fall, except for the creation story, I guess. I don't know. I just like the only things I can think of is like creation, and God has always existed, and then Lucifer got jealous and wanted to be worshipped like God, so he started a revolt against God, and he was cast down. And it talks about later on, I think in Revelation, that Jesus mentions that, or they mention that Jesus was there. He witnessed the fall of Lucifer, and kind of like it's almost like I don't know if it's like the beginning of sin or the pre-birth of sin, but like to me, I connect the rebellion of Lucifer to God and Adam and Eve being tempted with the tree of good and evil, all linked into like a jumbo. It's the whole package deal for the fall that happens and bringing sin into the world.
Yeah, that's the other question. Like, when you talk about the presupposition that prior to the fall was, there was no death and stuff, like how, like, do you consider the gap, like how do you define the gap theory? Like, is the gap theory included in this idea of perfection and no death and no killing? Because, in Bay, the gap theory is there's Lucifer, the devil, was an angel, and he betrayed God. God cast him out. All the demons that wanted to follow him went with him. There was a war, of some sort, a lot of fighting. There's no explanation on how long that went, when that was compared to the creation of Adam and Eve. So that's called the gap theory. It's like how much time took place on Earth from Lucifer falling to the creation of Adam and Eve. So with that being said, when they were fighting, I'm imagining there was death. So I don't, like I said, I don't know. Like I've reached my ceiling. Like I don't know what to do with that. Like that's way too much information to like sift through to try to come up with that answer. I just don't know. Like I just don't.
I'm glad because.
Go ahead, Greg.
I was gonna say I'm glad that he doesn't know, because that's something that I've always struggled with and try to figure out. I guess I'm not going to figure it out, but it's just something that I ponder a lot. It's just the gap theory.
I don't think our minds were made to consume or grasp. God's ways are so much bigger than our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. So our brains aren't capable of obtaining such knowledge. And I know that sounds crazy because as humans, we have this desire. So we're made in God's image. So I think it's normal for us to want to be able to have that capacity to learn and to know. But like at the end of the day, we're not God either. So I another thing I was going to hit on here really quickly. So we know that Jesus was always the answer. So is it possible that the creation is good because it's functional order, but because we knew Jesus was always going to be the answer to begin with?
Man, like, and that's a whole, like, that's what I'm saying, Twan. I don't know. It's too much. It's too much. Like you said, you summed it up perfectly. We're just not meant to know. There are plenty of answers in the Bible that are there for our benefit, and there are plenty that are not, because if God gave us all the answers, we wouldn't need him. So I don't know. I don't know, because to me, there's a whole bunch of more questions that are spawned from that statement. If Jesus was the answer all along, then, like, I don't know. Like, there's so much there's so much tragedy that takes place in the Old Testament. If it was just so Jesus could come back thousands of years later to say, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That's just so I don't. I've said I don't know probably too many times, but I just don't.
So I feel like in regards to like the book itself, and it may not happen, but I feel like John might dive deeper to his thoughts on this as it goes. And the reason I say that, because as the book's been flowing and I've been learning, is that I'll have a question and like say Proposition 1, but then come Proposition 3, he dives deeper into it. So I'm hoping that this proposition is almost like a cliffhanger and that he has more insight on it down the road. I didn't read forward. I don't know, but I just feel like how the book's been flowing, that he'll at least have his insights. Like you said, we might not come to a conclusion, but I think his insights are still to be coming down in further propositions. I mean, that's my hope, because I hope we can all kind of learn together with some of this stuff too.
Yeah, I agree with you. The way the book's been flowing, it's been like building blocks. And I feel like this is hopefully like a stepping stone to his thoughts on it, and to get our minds going on what he means by, the good before creation that we read in this current chapter. But like Curtis, I want to piggyback off Curtis and Antoine too, I guess, that I don't think our brains are meant to understand everything. And to go with Curtis, I don't know. That's my answer. I don't know. I believe the Bible has all the answers, but our brains can't untangle all the solutions. I think it's all in there. It's just too much for us to unpack all of it.
All right, so I think, are we about ready to wrap this one up? Does anyone have anything to add? No? All right, well, this is our opinion on Proposition 5. We'll have 6 next week.